Okay. So way back before we were so wonderfully interrupted by Pesach, we were in the middle of chapter 2 in Pirkei Avot and listening to the teachings of Hillel. And we mentioned that it's not 1,000% clear whether this Hillel is the original Hillel or whether this was a subsequent Hillel who was the son of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, so someone who lived actually about 250 years or more later after the first Hillel, but who was also a leader of the Jewish community. Anyway, we're on Mishnah 5, chapter 2, and we sort of started talking about this stuff, right? Am I ringing a bell with people?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I think we sort of discussed Al tifrosh min hatzibur, don't distance yourself from the community, don't withdraw from the community, things like that. We talked a little bit about what constitutes community. So I don't think we actually really dealt with the next phrase. There are a lot of phrases here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phrases altogether in this Mishnah. We did the first one. So the second one is Ve'al tamein be'atzmacha ad yom motcha. So let's get our comparative translations one more time, please. This is Mishnah 5. Hillel says, or used to say, or loved to say, or would teach, or whatever the translation is. And after the first phrase, which we're not going to, the one about community, we're not going to look at that again. But then the next clause. So who can read that? Okay, Geraldine, thank you.
Do not be sure of yourself till the day of your death.
Okay, so that's one translation. Before we get to our...
Sorry, I can't find where we are. It's Pirkei Avot 2, Mishnah 5. Right?
Yes, Hillel says.
Mine says he used to say,
what's next?
Brute is not sin-fearing.
That's the next Mishnah. So go up one Mishnah.
Oh, it's numbered differently. How weird.
Yeah, sometimes they get numbered differently.
All right.
Okay, you got it now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so, okay, that's pretty much the translation that most people have. One more time with feeling, Geraldine.
Do not be sure of yourself till the day of your death.
Okay, any slight variations on that? Yes, Rita.
Just the word trust not in thyself until the day of thy death.
Okay, any other variations? The Hebrew word is al ta'amein be'atzmecha. That's the same thing as al ta'amin. The yud was in there, would be al ta'amin. Without the yud, it's al ta'amein. And that's the word ani ma'amin. Right, ani ma'amin. So that word, we should be familiar with that word. The noun, that's the verb. The noun is Emunah. So what is that? What is that? What?
Faith.
Faith. Okay, so that would be another way to translate. We've got don't be confident in yourself, don't trust in yourself, or don't believe in yourself, don't have faith in yourself until the day of your death, until that last day. So we need to ponder what that might mean. And now we've got the Rabbi Rami Shapiro version. Who's going to
It's hardly different at all. Slight use of a different word, maybe. Do not be certain of yourself until you die.
Okay, do not be certain of yourself until you die. So we have a pretty much a close connection between all of these different ways of phrasing it. But that brings us now to the question, well, what exactly is he saying? What does that mean to be certain of yourself? Or what would it mean to trust yourself? And what is he saying that we shouldn't do that? What kinds of things does that mean about how we relate to ourselves that he's telling us, watch it? Yeah, Josie.
Yeah, I find do not be certain of yourself or do not have faith in yourself. Was that somebody else's?
Yeah.
I find that troubling. maybe it's because in modern psychology, you're always told, believe in yourself, believe in your goals. It's a completely different way of looking at one's place in the world.
Right. So the phrase definitely believe in yourself, like you said, sounds like a very positive kind of encouragement, empowering of each person, each person should have self-esteem. So what's he saying? Yeah, maybe he's saying something that's completely different from our own cultural values, or maybe he's saying something that is just not quite, it's not clashing in the same way. Sarita, yeah.
So I think it needs to be,
Can't hear you. No, when you go over there, you can't be heard. The beginning, we could hear you, and then you.
okay, can you hear me
we
now?
Yes, now perfect.
Okay, so I think it needs to be combined with what we said before. Don't separate yourself from the congregation, trust not in yourself. That don't go it alone. You need to be part of a larger group. So that's one possibility. And also that you don't always know, right? Other people might know more than you or better than you. So I think that those two things need to be juxtaposed.
Okay. Right. So you're not the know-it-all. You're not the ultimate standard for this. Okay.
I am definitely not. No.
Well, that's not what I was saying. I was just trying to say, with
You, right?
generic, right? One is not. How's that? Right? Yes, Bill.
Yeah, this is essentially what the Rabbi Shapiro says in a note. He talks about the tendency of humans to accept any delusion that makes them feel good. And he, in his note, he is interpreting this as to question one's motives, not the opposite of what Josie was saying, that you should trust in yourself and so on, but to be a little bit suspicious of your motives and to be humble. The note says the humility of not knowing is your greatest defense against the arrogance of false knowing. So it's not really a matter about be anything you want to be and trusting yourself. It's being a little bit suspicious that that you may not be quite as pure as the driven snow, or as correct in your thinking about whatever as you may have thought. I think that puts a nicer spin on it than Josie was doing. It's not original with me. This is Rabbi Shapiro.
Right. Thank you, John.
I think it's we're social creatures.
Prefer to be called publications.
Well, this is the account I logged in on, so I don't have to be admitted. I can start the meeting if I want.
Right.
I think it's about we're social creatures. When people are isolated, that leads to distortions of perception always when humans are not together. So I think what it's saying is that you can't trust yourself alone. Everything, your perception has to be put through someone else as well. You have to share it. You have to hear it back. You have to digest it with someone else. You can't live alone, and you can't keep yourself sane alone. And I take until the day of your death is just a fancy way of saying never. Like there's really no moment.
Right. That's one of the things that we would need to think about just a little bit. How do we take those last words, until the day of your death? Do we actually take that to heart as a significant statement, or like John is saying now, it just means never. Just don't forget about it. You can never completely just say I'm satisfied and everything that I see is right and my perspective is right and I don't need anybody else and all that kind of stuff. But we might think that he's actually talking about coming to the day of one's death, and that might color how we look at this a little bit. Adam, you wanted to say something?
Just that I think it would have to mean never, as John suggested, because you don't know the day of your death. I mean, or on very rare occasions you might, but by and large, you don't know when that day is going to be. So it's not a day that you can behave any differently than any of the days before. It just seems like a very poetic way of saying never.
Right. So there's a teaching, and unfortunately, one second, Sarita, somewhere, and I can never remember where it is in Pirkei Avot, it's because I always jumble them all around. Somewhere it says, Shuv Yom Echad Lifnei Motcha. repent one day before you die. And following up on Adam's point, well, when is that? We never will know that. So therefore, the understanding that most people put into that statement is, well, any day could be the day before you die. You'll never know the day that you die. So repent now. Don't put it off. So that's connected to that idea. Sarita.
So I was thinking that also this meant that this doesn't just apply to you when you're younger. No matter how old you get, how many years you've lived in the world, you still might not be the one who has the monopoly on truth and correctness and such. So I don't think that that doesn't apply to you just because you're older. Yeah.
Some people throw in not just one's perspective and all of that, but also one's own virtue. That and they take that idea of trusting yourself or believing in yourself. Now, I know I'm a good person. I know that I'm one of the good guys. Of course, that affects my perspective regarding other people. And we're going to look at the very next phrase, clause, whatever, and see that it might be very much connected to what I'm saying here. But to be sure of oneself, I'm not a person who can be not cognitively misled, but behaviorally misled. I'm not the person. I'm not going to make those kinds of dumb mistakes that other people make. I'm not going to ever be tempted by the different things that other people are tempted by, and then they ruin their lives or they ruin other people's lives. I'm safe and sound. So one way to read this is just in that kind of moral arena. Don't think that you as a human being are any different than every other human being. We are all prone to sin and mistake and all kinds of other misdeeds and treating other people in a bad way. So you've never lost your temper in 70 years. Don't think that you'll never ever lose your temper just because you haven't lost it yet. That's the way some people read it as well. I want to flip it around a little bit. Let's take this metaphoric phrase at the end. Let's just take it a little more seriously. What would it mean to, yes, most of us don't know exactly the day of our death. And even the day that we die, we're not always sure that that's the day that we're dying, right? So God willing, we'll all live healthy, good lives till 120. But not only that, what about when we take a person who actually knows they're dying? What about, and that's not as uncommon as we might think, a person who really knows that they're close to death. And if we take the word day, not to mean necessarily 24 hours, but they know that they're dying. Not in 6 months maybe, but soon. So many people know that, if they're blessed actually or cursed with consciousness and a clear head at that point. There's a whole concern as our population ages and as we many of us are aging. Everybody here is aging actually, but some of us feel it a little more strongly than others. Meeting one's death. How do you prepare for death? How do you, when you do see yourself in that final stage, how does that affect how you see other people and how you see yourself? So I wonder whether we could turn this around then. Don't believe in yourself. Don't trust yourself. Don't have so much confidence in yourself, until the day of your death. Now let's come to the day of my death. If I would flip it around, then he's giving me permission to have some kind of trust in myself as I'm about to die.
That's interesting.
Right? There's a kind of an acceptance that is then possible, right? And for for so many people who beat themselves up daily, and constantly have a struggle with believing in themselves or accepting that they're basically okay. If that's a struggle that leads you to try harder, to try things in general that you might otherwise not try that are worthwhile, or even just not be afraid to make a mistake, but to learn from it. So, okay, so then not believing in yourself can have that positive function. But then when we get to the end, and guess what? I'm not going to do that 14th career change, or job jump, or whatever. Is there some wisdom in then trying to come to a belief in oneself, by that, and saying, okay, here's the package. Here's what I did. Here's what I was able to be, and I can live with that. That might be a flip side of looking at this. Let's go to any other comments on this. So let's go to the next phrase, the next teaching. Okay, and again, we'll hold off with the Shapiro version, and again, let's just read that next one. Geraldine, you want to try it again?
Sure. Do not judge your fellow human being till you stand in his situation.
Okay. Any modifications, any little tweaks on that? Craig.
Not really. Shapiro
Craig,
is.
wait, Craig.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's good. It's against the Rabbi Hertz one. It's, judge not thy fellow man until thou art come into his place.
Right. So the thous are very important. That makes us take this a little more seriously. Just kidding. Okay. So don't judge other people until you're, as we would say it, in their shoes, right? In their place. Okay. And Bill and Josie have the alternative version. Any substantive difference?
Not really.
What does it
Basically
say?
the same. Do not judge others until standing in their place.
Okay, right. In the Hebrew, there's a slight literal change that we might make, until you reach their place. Okay, ad shetagia limkomo, until you reach their place. It doesn't say ad shetamod bimkomo, until you stand in their place, but until you reach their place. But I think the overall message is definitely the same and clear to us. Bringing it back to the previous teaching, right? There's the attitude toward oneself, and then the attitude toward other people. And here, first of all, don't be so confident in your own wisdom or capabilities or self-sufficiency, right? And then flipping it around over here, and don't be so judgmental. Don't be so ready to judge what somebody else has done or become until you reach their situation, their place.
The difference.
Yeah, Josie.
The difference between reading it, reach their place, and standing in their place is interesting, because it conveys that it may take you a while to really understand what someone else's life has meant to them and where it's led them.
Right.
I think that's a better way of doing it, till you reach.
Yeah, John.
These kinds of statements confuse me sometimes. To say, you shouldn't judge people, that's a virtuous thing. But of course, you have to make judgments in some ways. You have to look at people and say, I don't think that's a good person. I'm not going to hang out with that person. Here's a person I think is good and they're doing good things. I'm going to emulate them. It's like when they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's why books have covers. To know what the book's about before you buy the book. So I understand being non-judgmental, but the other question is, like, when it says until you've reached their place, which is that a limit, like a mathematical limit that you can never reach? Like, you can't really reach anyone's place ever, really. So it's really sort of like saying, so it's impossible. So it's moderating that I never, from these kinds of statements, know how to, make a livable rule about that. Because it seems like you're always judging. Do I want that job? Well, what are the people like? Not judgment like you're going to hell, but judge like, what should I do?
Right. So, okay, Geraldine, then Craig, then Sarita.
Just something that John just said when he said you don't judge a book by its cover, but many times you don't know what the cover means or the title means until after you've read the book.
Wow.
Okay, so, but all those cover designers, they're hoping to hook you with something ahead of time before you've read the book, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll, if you told the designer, I never really understood everything you did on that cover until after I read the book, they probably would feel very good about that.
Okay.
But they wouldn't be failing in their job if the cover could not be appreciated before you read the book.
Mhm.
Something has to draw you with that cover. Otherwise nobody's going to buy the book, and they'll be out of a job. So what you're pointing out is it takes time, right? It takes more time. Yeah, I think that's actually one of the threads that ties all of these statements together. When we finally look through all of them, I think we'll see that. Craig.
Yeah, when it says that you shouldn't judge someone until you come into their place, it almost sounds like coming to their place is a passive thing. Like you have to suspend judgment, and if you should happen to be in their place, then you can do it. And I think what this is really saying is, no, you need to make an effort to find out what their circumstances are.
Okay, so that's interesting. The opposite of what John was suggesting, which is a statement that many people make as an interpretation. Since it's mathematically impossible for two things to occupy the same spot, so you can never be in the same spot as that other person. So therefore, you will never be able to judge that other person. But you're bringing up this kind of idea of make an effort to try to understand better, to get closer to where they are, to get to that place. So a little bit of a flip. Yeah, Sarita.
I guess my point is a continuation of what Craig was saying is, yes, we do make judgments all the time, but don't make a judgment just because somebody isn't like you, right? Just because they're in different circumstances. And again, I think this obviously aligns with just don't trust yourself and think that you know everything. And this is also what it means to be part of a community, right? That you have to not just think of yourself and, put yourself first and assume that you always know anything. You have to also look at other people and include people in your community who are not exactly like yourself. So I think that's the balance here.
Yeah. Adam.
If we look at this, I'm thinking that until you've reached their place is maybe another poetical way of saying never, because if you read it in light of the previous one, which we were discussing, do not trust yourself into the day of your death, meaning that you're evolving basically until the end of your life, then you never really reach your place until you die, let alone somebody else's. It's really saying it's not for you to judge.
Right. So what do we do? So all good so again, how do we find that balance? If it's not for us to judge, so what kind of judging is it for us to do? John's question, we're always judging. We're always coming to, we have to make choices. We have to, have a perspective on things and people. Who do we hang out with and who we decide not to hang out with? If we have people in our care. We're always concerned about, are they hanging out with the right crowd or not? So
Or you
we're,
judge a certain political candidate as unworthy.
well,
and-
that's easy. That we just know, if whatever, it depends what party they're in, and then we just know. So that's
But
it.
but my point is, you're judging the person. It's not just like, oh, what they do. You're saying this person has to be stopped.
Right.
You know,
So-
that's a judgment.
but well, you know, so this kind of joke that we just were involved with actually is a big conversation in our society today, right? Where there's a whole push, let's humanize each other more. We don't have to agree. We can totally you know, fight to the death about what policy we think is the right thing, but let's see each other as human beings. Let's not denigrate the other person. Let's not show disrespect for the humanity of the other person. But it's very hard to make that distinction, right? There's the famous, you know, Christian kind of negotiation, right? Hate the sin, love the sinner. Which is, you know, does it have some value? I guess, but somewhere along the line, that balance tends to break down, right? So how do we maintain the balance? Or what kind of balance should we be striving for?
I think it hinges on what judge means. That's my question really, is what does it mean to judge? If it's judging someone's humanity, that's different than judging someone's upstandingness in society or something. So it just it depends on what is being judged, which is why I have a hard time understanding these kinds of statements. Like, what does that mean? There has to be some judgment at some level of everything. So I guess it means judging the humanity of somebody. I wish it elucidated that subset of judgment.
Well, so that's always, you know, one of the struggles we have with texts that aren't as clear as we want them to be. We want that text to be clear, and actually,
I judge it unclear.
I judge it unclear, right? And condemned, right? Condemned to the, you know, such a murky text. On the other hand, there's an advantage in that we can keep on talking about this forever, right? For thousands of years, we've been drawing wisdom from these things because we end up taking these wiggly propositions and then, you know, turning them or applying them in a way that makes sense to us. And that changes over time, and it changes from one person to another. The question of raising up the issue of judgment, that's a very worthwhile question. And I don't know that you could actually be clear. This is the good kinds of judgment that you should make, and these are the really bad kinds of judgment that you should make. But asking yourself that question all the time, am I being too judgmental, or what kind of judgment have I arrived at? Is that judgment accurate? Is it fair? Right? That's a lot of what this is about. Be fair to the other person. You know, what goes into the defining the place is the other part. You know, multi-million-dollar, you know, executive, you know, who has everything that they want in life and completely mistreats people right and left. Well, I'm not a multi-million-dollar person, but you know, so what are the things I don't know about this person that would then be extenuating circumstances? Well, he was mistreated when he was 3 years old by somebody or something like that. So that I don't know. On the other hand, there's all this other stuff. So it brings that kind of complexity into my consciousness. And it brings, of course, the question of personal responsibility also to the fore, right? What is the place that you have reached? How did you get there? How did you get there? And of course, it's hard to tell. It's hard to know. There's a famous story that a rabbi was living in a dicey neighborhood. And every time coming home from the study hall, he would see violence and he would be harassed and it was unsafe and it was terrible. And he would come home and he'd be miserable and he would say, I pray that all of these ruffians and hooligans and bums, should be, God should just wipe them out. And then his wife said to him, well, don't you know what the psalmist says? The psalmist says at the end of Psalm 104, Yitamu chataim min haaretz u'reshaim odeinam. So let all sin cease from the earth, and there be no more wicked people. So she says, it doesn't say chotim, sinners. It says sin. If sin would disappear, there wouldn't be any wicked people. So we're not asking for the sinners to disappear, we're asking for the sins to disappear. So you should pray that they should somehow find a better way to live and not feel that they have to do all these terrible things. So he took her teaching to heart, and the story has a happy ending. In the end, it turned out that all of these people left the gangs that they were part of and found a new way to live, and so on and so forth. And we have stories like that all the time. There's a Father Boyle, I forgot his first name, who is famous for working with ex-gang members. And he doesn't get them to leave their gangs, but then he gives them support when they leave. So here's a question of judgment. He has made a judgment. He tried in the beginning in his ministry. He's a Catholic priest. He started in the beginning to try to work with gang members and to try to change them. And then he made a judgment. He made a judgment. Oh, we're going over time. He made a judgment that, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to succeed. I can't do it. And he said, that's not where I can do work. But where I can do work is if somebody does decide to leave the gang, I will embrace them, I will support them, I will respect them, I will help them get a new life, get job training, feel accepted into the tzibur, into the community, right? So there is a judgment. People that are in the gang that are murdering other people, that are terrorizing other people, they're doing terrible things and they're in a lot of trouble personally. But then he says, but they themselves can reach another place, and then I don't hold what they were or what they've done against them. So that complicates things even further. All right, we went over. That's enough for today, and I look forward to continuing next time. Okay.
Yasher Koach.
So,
Thank you.